Progress.
All right. Good evening. It's Tuesday, October 15th, 2024, at 6:30 p.m. This is the City of Franklin Common Council. Would you please take the roll, Madam Clerk?
Mayor Nelson.
Here.
Alderman Pecorelli.
Here.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Here.
Alderman Hassan.
Here.
Alderwoman Day.
Here.
Alderman Barber.
Here.
Alderman Craig.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we've had a few updates to the agenda, a few additions and such. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the City of Franklin meeting rules of decorum for attendees and participants. Copy of this is laminated up at the podium and is also copies on top of that little brown attaché. For those attending City of Franklin meetings, number 1, respectful and orderly conduct is expected at all times. Number 2, disruptive or unruly behavior, including but not limited to clapping, verbal disruptions, signs, and outbursts will not be tolerated. For those wishing to speak during City of Franklin meetings, number 1, approach the microphone when the chair opens the floor for citizen comments. State your name and address for the record. Address your comments to the Common Council Board, Commission, or Committee only. Limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. No endorsements or electioneering are allowed. Speakers shall refrain from presenting unduly repetitious, offensive, threatening, slanderous, defamatory, or obscene remarks. Persons wishing to speak as a spokesperson on behalf of a neighborhood, subdivision, homeowners, condominium, or business association, or similar group with common interests shall demonstrate their qualifications to do so according to the City of Franklin Resolution number 2007-6227 before speaking on that body's behalf. Questions may be answered immediately by the chair, which is me, or referred to city staff for a future reply in a timely manner. Those not adhering to these rules of decorum for attendees and participants will be asked to leave or be removed from the meeting if necessary. So with that, anybody wishing to speak, please approach the podium, and if you wish to speak after that person, please come on behind them to kind of move things forward. Again, state your name and address for the record, and 3 minutes or less. Floor is now open. Going once, twice. Oh, Mr. Rotzenberg, good evening and welcome. I had it.
I saw you had it up in the gavel in your hand.
Good evening and welcome.
Paul Rotzenberg. I live at 6713 West River Point Drive, and just for full disclosure, I'm the former finance director for the City of Franklin, having retired in 1921, right? I want to speak to you this evening about the presentation that you're going to have on the assessing process. Recently, I was before you and I talked about a very consequential decision that you were about to make at that meeting. I believe that in February of 22, this body elected an assessor that was not appropriate for the City of Franklin. And several of the assessing problems that exist were a result of that decision. We rely on you as residents to make important decisions on our behalf. And the assessing process is one of the important processes that government has, as the assessment allocates the tax levy amongst the taxpayers. You know more than we know as residents, and certainly the agenda item as it was posted merely said that you're going to have information, so I don't know what necessarily is out there and what information you have. I want to compliment you on making the open book available to the public on the website so we can see all properties and what they were assessed at. I took the opportunity to look at my particular subdivision, and I visited with my alderman on that topic. I believe the assessments in my particular subdivision were done relatively ratably and accurately, so my compliments to you on that. But I doubt that you're hearing from residents that had assessment reductions, and you're probably hearing from residents that had assessment increases. I also noticed that in 2023, the city had a lot of tax rebates that were done. That means that your assessment process for the 2023 assessment rule was not done right. It's a consequence of your 2022 process. I hope this evening when you hear from the assessors about the process, you find out things such as how many properties were more increased, what was the average increase across the city for assessments, how many properties increased substantially above that average, and how many properties assessed came in below that so that they can see what's going to potentially happen to their taxes. I hope you hear from the assessor about how the state reported actual sales in 23 compared to what the assessments were. Every year, this Department of Revenue submits to each city a comparison of the sale reports, and you can see how your assessments compare to what the actual sales took place. And that's an indicator for you of how the assessment process worked. Be very interested to hear this evening from the assessor about the process, how it was done. Clearly, there were a lot of changes that were made, and it would be interesting to understand why and how they came about those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rensenberg. Good evening, Mr. Seymour.
Orville Seymour, 3020 West Acre, 49-year resident, City of Franklin. I know the assessment's a hot topic, and I understand the assessment is not going to increase your taxes automatically. There's a long process that you guys go through. But before you vote to increase property taxes on anybody, I would ask you to ask yourself this simple question. Do the City of Franklin government need that money more than the property taxpayers who have to fork it out? It's a simple question. It's a really simple question. And is it worth the heat that you're going to have to take, which might be led by me, if you vote to increase those taxes? Okay? The second thing I would like to talk about is the referendum in Oak Creek Franklin School District, which I am a resident. It's been almost 25 years since I fought the referendum at the Oak Creek High School, almost single-handedly, and beat them 3 times in a row. At that time, it was $28 million. And it was the 3rd highest referendum in state history. Now it's $34 million, and that's chump change. People, we cannot afford this any longer. These taxes are killing people, and driving business out of the city and driving people out of the city. It's time to vote no on some of this stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Anyone else wishing to speak? Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Edward Chen, a resident at 9354 West Woofle Road. And I heard the gentleman's talk before me, and there's a good point. And we would like to hear how the value and assessment based on. I do not know some other people's property valuation at the moment, but I can tell mine. And mine, the property value increased from last year by 68%. 68%. So I want to bring to everybody's attention, this is not a new house. It's not new building. There's no improvement. I only had the roof replaced. That's about it. So the city sent out a flyer that previously the land value didn't increase much. So they put that value into the property. So this year they corrected that. So I see my land's value increased from 97,400 to 244,300. So when you shift that, you correct that, I expect the house value, the building value would drop because old days you put that into the building value. But instead, my building value increased from 752,600 to 1.184 million. That's more than 50% increase. And at the same time, the land value increased more than 150%. So I really would like to hear how that come. And I also looked up my house value from all those realtor, from Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. Every single one is set somewhere between 1.1 million to 1.19 million. But here, from the city, it's 1.428 million. So really, I do not think my house valued that much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak? See no one? Closed citizen comment period. Approval of the minutes, regular common council meeting of October 1st, 2024. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
First,
Second.
and we've got a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Let's see here, we've got no hearings. Under organizational business, E as in Edward, mayoral commission appointees, James McWilliams, 4645 West Sherwood Drive, Alderman District 4, Technology Commission, 3-year term expiring April 30th of 2025. Is there a motion for that?
Motion to confirm.
Second.
We have a first and a second, roll call, please.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
6 ayes, none opposed, motion carries. There's no letters under F. Going into G1. Informational council update from the city assessors, forward appraisal. If you'd like to come up here to the table here and. So what, just so everybody knows, these are representatives from the appraisal company. And if you would just simply state your name and business address for the record, and then we'll be off to the races.
Yep, my name is Nicole Tesh for Forward Appraisal. Address is P.O. Box 13434, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Scott Elvey with Forward Appraisal, P.O. Box 13434, Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Good evening, welcome, and thank you. So, we've all gotten here's mine, my assessment, and, mine's up 11,700, but I have a modest house in the far west side of Franklin. And I know, hearing different, people come up here and talk, and there's questions, and there's been, information put out from back in February, back in May, and then we put out that press release going over things like that, and I want to let you do your thing up here, but we are trying to communicate as much as possible, because had we put out that last piece of information prior to the assessment letters going out, I don't think it would have been as effective, and that's why I think the timing was on me for that, and I think it was the most efficient way to do it, and not, if we put out a month ago, I don't think it would have been read or discussed until after this came out. So that was my reasoning for doing, and the timing the way it was. So what I'd like to do is, why don't you guys start your talk, and then we'll go with questions from the alders.
That sounds great. Yep. So I did just kind of put a summary together just like last time to discuss basically where we were at from the last point. We hadn't finished the work at the time. We have obviously finished it. And I just want to mention, we do put together a pretty comprehensive report at the end of a revaluation. It could be this thick, I'm not sure. That's something that you can certainly have access to. We can give you copies of. That's going to be probably after our board review, because right now we're focusing on talking to property owners, getting in properties if we need to, and taking care of that first. But as far as completed work, since our last update, obviously assessments have been mailed. We handled some agricultural use conversions. There were quite a few properties that were listed as ag, were not being tilled, hadn't been tilled for probably a couple years. So we did review all of those, and those require separate letters that we send them notification, because there is a fee associated with that. And so we took care of those. We did update the city website, because previously we were relying on some older data as being available to property owners. We took all of our data, pushed it through to the website that we use, so that property owners can see their house information, their sketch, and use that as a resource. Ongoing work that we are still looking at is getting some of the data into our system, such as historical notes and some historical building permits. Was not a necessity at this point. It's older stuff, but we want it there for reference. We're going to continue to work on replacing sketch images because that was something that was brought up to us at the time of the request for proposal for this job, was converting sketch images, and we will probably have that done earlier than June of 2026, but there's 13,000 of them that need to be done, so it's going to take some time.
Could you say that one time a little bit louder?
Sure, yep. The component of the request for proposal that addressed sketches. So previously, the sketches for all properties were vector-based, which is very usable. Were converted by the prior assessment company into just a JPEG image, which is not usable. You can look at it, but you can't cross-reference square footage with it. So we are going through all of those sketches and resketching them to a proper usable vector-based sketch. But
And how many were there? My point was, how many are there?
all of them, so that needed to be done.
13.
So
That's what you
that
just-
is over
was my point.
13,000.
13,000 documents, got it.
Correct, yes. That were good and then were made not good very quickly. So we have all of the commercial ones have been completely resketched. All of the commercial properties have been completely relisted because that information was unusable as well, but we talked about that earlier. And then the last thing I have on here is just we are continuing to confirm assessment data by visiting 10 properties, or 10% of properties each year. I think our estimate, I think we're up to about 7 or 8% at this point, but we started in March. So I would expect by March we'll be through 10% or more easily. So I think that's on track for where it needs to be. Our timeline, just as a refresher, the board met on June 5th, adjourned to October 2nd, met again on October 2nd, and will adjourn to November 20th, which is our border review date. Open book began October 7th, and that's going to continue on until border review. So we had put on our letter, please reach out to us via email or phone, and then we were here this week. We'll be here Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for walk-in, just to make ourselves as accessible as possible, because the more people we talk to, the better that the information is. We're correcting information as we go, as we find things, correcting values if they need to be. And we wanted to make sure there was enough time to do that. As far as open book, I'm sure this is something you may be wondering. Number of open book contacts, and this was totaled as of yesterday evening. We've been reached by phone or email, 261 property owners. That's where we're at this point, about a week and a day in. Out of those 261 property owners, we've made 68 changes as a direct result of that contact, either by viewing something in person to get it corrected or getting information over the phone. I just kind of highlight some of these. Most of the changes that we're seeing are inaccuracy of the prior building grade. We've talked a lot about it with property owners. It's the quality of construction, and I think somebody who spoke earlier, I didn't catch the name, I apologize, but a lot of times, if there was an increase in the building that was pretty substantial, we are finding it had to do with a grade issue, which is something that was prior assessment data carried over. We have to assume and have to trust that much of that data is right. It's been that way for decades. If it's not, though, it's being brought to our attention and we fix it. That is, we can only get as many as we can in the time period we have right now. But by and large, that was one of the bigger ones that we're seeing. I think the additional information from property owners has been pretty common as well. Information that we didn't have regarding easements or contiguous land or restrictions or outlots, those sorts of things. We did have a few areas where there was a discrepancy in the water source or sewer connectivity that didn't match with either what we had on record or what we had saw on the map. And then we did have a recalculation in two condo associations. One had to do with a discovery that I think it was 47 units were previously listed for, as far back as we can tell, as having basement, and they don't. So we had one property reach out to us, and after talking to her, and then also, I think, site visit, we're very clear there was no basement. And so we had to go back through all of those condos and fix that information. Regarding the revaluation statistics and totals, I think this was mentioned earlier, there are a number of resources that we use to try and figure out where the level of assessment is. So where those assessments are compared to where the market is. And one of those is the Department of Revenue sale ratio study. And I have information from 22 and 23. This is what we look at. Keep in mind that the information from these reports, which I'm happy to give you copies of if you want, are based on sales that were validated in that year compared to the assessments of that same year. And one of the things that's come up a lot is vacant land in general or land values in general. And on the report specifically in 2022, based off of 31 vacant land sales, the average level of assessment was 28%, meaning our assessments were 28% of market value according to those sales. In 2023, that changed. There were only 15 sales, but the aggregate ratio or the average ratio was 51%. So you can kind of see, and I'm going to make the inference that when a revaluation was done, supposedly in 2022 and 2023, you would expect to see that number get corrected. It moved a little, sure, from 22 to 23, but still 50%. So, you know, I look at this and I see, okay, that may be an indicator that land needs to go up double in some cases. But until we start looking at the bigger picture with improvements, I don't know that. And that comes later in the stages of what we were doing. But just in general, we kind of rely on these numbers to tell us where the assessments were at previously and where they need to go. We do our own internal ratio study. The difference between that, again, I'm happy to share this with anybody who wants it. I can make copies. The ratio study that we do is now, instead of comparing the prior assessments to the sales of that year, we compare our current assessments. So what it's assessed for 2024 versus what the sales showed in 2023. And that indicated about a level of assessment of 98%. Our aim is 100. It's close. We have to be within 10%, but ideally better than that. So as far as I can tell on that, at least, we were pretty confident with that ratio study. The other thing that I wanted to mention here was the level of assessment indicated from prior year sales for last year was 95%. The land increases contributed most to the overall increase, as we mentioned already. And then the total increase was 10%, and the total increase minus new construction was 9%. For commercial, we had a level of assessment indicated from prior year sales was pretty inconclusive. I think we dug into that there were like 5 sales, which is not a great indicator. Usually the DOR will reach out to other municipalities, kind of group you together in other areas and try to get a better picture there as to level of assessment. And I think they came around 92% was their estimate. The total increase for commercial was 13%, and the total increase minus new construction was 6%. And then I did provide some new construction totals. It was pretty substantial this year, 48 million for residential and 89 million for commercial.
Can you say it one more time, please?
Yeah, new construction totals for this year were 48 million for residential compared to 44 million, which is what the total was for new construction last year. And commercial was 89 million compared to the prior year of 53 million.
Thank you.
And then the charts below that, this is just kind of, I think it kind of answers the first point that was made tonight, was the residential increase by range. And you can kind of see on this chart here that I think we calculated it was roughly 85% of properties in the city saw an increase less than 20%. And then there, obviously you're going to have some outliers. And what I would caution, and we say this to property owners as well, the percent increase is a measurement tool. And normally I would say it's a reliable measurement tool, except that the half of the equation is last year's assessment. And take that for what it's worth. I found last year's assessment values to be pretty inequitable. So by comparing our numbers this year to that number, you're kind of inherently using that and assuming that it was correct. That's what I would caution a little bit about that percent increase, but we still look at it. On the last page, you've got the residential land increase. This is where you see that bigger change. So the roughly 85%, I think it was, also were 100% increase or less. The vast majority or the largest percentage were in that 25 to 50% range. Residential land increases by range or percent range. We did this to exclude condos specifically because we did notice that one of the biggest areas where we saw this issue of land value being very, very, very low was in condo associations. And I think that's a product of the methodology that was used to establish those land values. And if your question is how was that methodology applied last year, I don't have an answer because I have no idea. There were no models, so I don't know how they came up with that land value prior. We do know how we came up with our land value this year, and we've been answering that to property owners as they call. So I think that's all I have, and I'm
Sure, there'll be some questions.
yeah, no, I wanted to leave time for questions. So
And thank
yep.
you again. So
No problem.
I'll go last, because I think I've got some of Mr. Rotzenberg's questions down here that
Sure.
he had asked. Who would like to start? I could break the ice, and you guys can jump in when you feel confident.
I'll go.
Oh, Alderwoman Day.
Sure, I'll go. I apologize if I'm a little bit disjointed because you answered some of my questions, so I just want to kind of, I'll go through these, maybe not in the most logical order. Going off of something that the mayor spoke about before your presentation, he talked a little bit about the communication and the timing of it and whatnot. And I guess my question was, and I appreciate you responding to my email earlier this week, I guess I would have liked to have seen that little blurb about the land value within the assessment packet that came out, because I think
We agree.
there would have been less
We agree.
sticker shocked.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the one piece that I would have liked to have seen. The one thing I will say again to Mr. Rotzenberg, once I got his email, and thank you again for that, I then went through the open book online and kind of pulled a street out just to do my own, analysis in my neighborhood. And by and large, I would agree. It did look fairly similar, although there were outliers. So I guess what I would ask for you, for a lot of people who may not understand exactly how those land values are calculated, could you just give, just a brief synopsis of, because say in the email response that I got, it was, a half acre lot in this neighborhood 2 blocks away should be similar to a half acre, lot in the same neighborhood, but sometimes they're not. So, I mean, I'm assuming that, to me as a layperson, things that come into play, is it a corner lot? Is the land that's there developable, or is it, I mean, like what kind of things could come into play so that if I'm looking at my land, for example, is an acre, and my neighbor's land is an acre, and we're vastly different, what could be?
Sure. They shouldn't be. Is
Commonality.
right out of the gate, I would say they shouldn't be, but
If they're in the same neighborhood.
if they're in the same neighborhood, yes. So I'm going to start at the beginning of, I think, that question. So in order for us to derive value for land, we have to look at vacant sales. That's just straight up mandated by the state. It's in our property assessment manual. That is the approach that's supposed to be taken. So we look at vacant land sales first. That's stage one. And we're not going to have a perfect system where you just have a bunch of sales in every single neighborhood that are just a perfect model. We have to make inferences. So where those land sales occurred, a lot of times they're new developments. But we look at those and we try to figure out what is an appropriate starting point for essentially $1 per square foot, because that's what we're looking at. We determine usually that the most valuable portion of the land is going to be the first quarter of an acre. That's pretty standard. You need about that much to be able to put a house on it. So we say that is the most valuable portion of the lot. Beyond that, we go, okay, now the next half of an acre is going to be worth less than that, not the same, because there is not the same necessity for it. So we look at these land sales, we figure out where they're located, what different things impact them, whether it's sewer and water, not having that. If it is high traffic, we definitely look at stuff like that, where you're on a busy street, and what other things impact it. And then from there, we do create models and apply them by neighborhood to keep it consistent. So yeah, your neighbor, if they have the same size lot, should be valued the same. And I think that's applied across the city. Commercial's different, same approach, but different values, obviously, because they have different uses. But one of the things that I would comment on about the land specifically is there are some neighborhoods that are newer subdivisions that, well, I should say neighborhoods that have new subdivisions in it. And what we found were the older areas had not had any land touched whatsoever. The new ones were literally at the price that they paid for it, which is not fair, right? Because you've got property owners who are roughly on estimate 50% of market value on their land, and property owners who are at 100% of value on their land. That's just not fair. It's not uniform. And it's also what indicates to me that a model was not used to produce those values, which is what keeps us fair and equitable, not just at market value. So I don't know if I missed something. I apologize.
No, thank you for explaining that in
Okay.
a little bit greater detail. I think on a personal level, that explains something in my brain for my assessment.
Sure.
But and I would say if people have that concern, so say they're looking at, open book and they see something like that and they see it's a discrepancy, you would still recommend
Call.
that they give you a
Call,
call or an
call,
email
yes.
or something, just so you
Yes.
can kind of explain what was going on specific to their property.
100%.
And I will say that everybody that I know that has contacted me, that has in turn contacted you, you've turned around in less than 24 hours. So thank you
We
for
are
that.
trying.
I
Yep.
know
Yes.
mental task with this many people, but
Yep.
you are being very responsive. So I do thank you for that.
I appreciate you all understanding too, because I think I mentioned at the last meeting, there's two of us. So when we get 30 or 40 calls in a day, it's just not realistic to answer all of them. And so at this point, we've been able to keep up that we are basically handling all the calls from the prior day. We get through them and then we move on to the next day. That may not always be the case if all of a sudden we get 50 in a day, but we are certainly trying. So.
And I have two more questions, one more
Yep.
for you and then one perhaps for the Director of Finance or Director of Administration. You had mentioned in an email that I had seen from another constituent that basically the kind of average, and I'll use that term loosely, of percent increase for residential was about 11%, around 11%. What would you say is the average for the commercial industrial side? Did we see a little bit go up, a little bit? What would you say the average is?
It was 6.
So in the email, the 11% was just kind of a general citywide average. That included city and,
Oh, included.
right.
Okay.
The number that I was referencing in those emails would be like what we did based on the preliminary, and it was just a very raw data. Here's the overall increase. So that was just a reference there.
6% is
6%.
what I would use, yep, for commercial. And I think there were not a lot of sales.
Sure.
So that's where, from an assessment standpoint, we're going to be a little bit cautious there because I need to be able to defend those values. But yeah, I would say 6% for the commercial.
And then my last question, this is internally. So we don't know exactly yet what's going to happen to everybody's tax bill. There's still a lot, there's still moving pieces. So this, still is kind of a nebulous cloud. But there is a chance that there are a fair number of properties that may see a tax increase. And it is a true statement that some people rely on squirreling away things in their escrow account based on, prior year's assessments. So they might be a little short. Or they're on fixed incomes, and I could see like panic setting in, because we're now, October 15th. We don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. The end of the year is coming due very quickly when tax bills are going to come out. Is there anything we can do on a city level to try to help people who might be in a pinch for this? So, for example, two ideas I had, I don't know if it's possible, but is it, for the people that choose the payment plan, could they like backload it, instead of, 3 equal payments, can we somehow offset it to give them a little bit more time to come up with it if they need it? Is there a way that we can defer the date, push it back a little bit? Is there anything we can do to help out people who might be pinched a little bit if their taxes do end up going up? Without putting the city in a bad position.
That's something that I'm going to have to look into. I know that our dates are set. The statute is set as to when the first or what is included in the first installment, which is typically a certain percentage, and then all special assessments and all of that. So
Yeah. So I guess the question is more like what we have on hand to, front to back pay
Correct.
or anything, but just to think creatively as we get to that point, if there's anything, if people do truly have a hardship for this, because I can anticipate that there may be some folks that do end up having a hardship if their taxes do go up, just
Well, and just a
to the timeline, this
Right.
being a little bit shortened.
And just a reminder, yeah, we do have the 3 installments, so the, January, March, and May. So that does kind of already give people a little bit of flexibility.
Thank you, I yield.
Alderwoman Eichman?
Thank you. I also wanted to start by thanking you as well from my constituents that have contacted you. The feedback that I've heard is your excellent response time. So thank you again
Thank you.
as well for that. One question that I have, and then I may go into some later on and give the others opportunity to ask questions, is again going back to that land value. So for example, a condo in my district, District 2, the land value of a condo, one example I have is $84,000 of the land value, but yet a residential home that is much larger square footage wise for the condo is less than that. So how is that figured again with condos?
Condos are kind of their own thing, and I will say that lightly because when we look at a condo association, in most cases, at least all but one, I think, their condo declaration states that they own equal undivided interest in the land. And for each condo association, that land could vary pretty dramatically. We've got, the number of condos on a specific acre could vary. You could have them sitting on a very large piece of land, but generally there has to be land associated with it. But to add to that, we look at the building value is consistent from condo to condo, but also house to house. So they're valued very similar to a home. And then we look at sales. And those sales, the difference between our building value and that sale has to be the land. You have to put it somewhere. And rather than artificially inflate the building and make it not comparable to other condos or not comparable to other homes, it gets placed on the land, kind of like a locational benefit essentially. But it changes from different condo association, but within the association, that land should be consistent, especially if the declaration states they have equal undivided interest, meaning they should all have the same land value. Right or wrong, we look at that total value at the end. And I go, if that's what you can sell your condo for, it's not so much about the allocation of land to building, but what that total value is. And condos are a little bit unique. They are different than a single family home, so the approach has to be a little bit different as well.
Okay, thank you. So and say there's 6 condo units in one building, each, for example, would then have the land value of 84,000. But if you take that 84,000 and multiply it by 6,
Yep.
that's far more.
It is.
It outweighs the
It
total
is.
value. which is
However,
losing.
the highest and best use of that land is better with 6 units on it than it is with a single family house. So you're getting more use out of that land. It's no different than an apartment building where you're getting 10 units on an apartment building. You're creating more value out of that land or use out of that land because it's more densely used. The same applies to condos.
And I think you went over this as well. I had a constituent reach out to me today that was unable to be here. Franklin High School has their student conferences tonight. But the assessed value is based upon, I think you mentioned this earlier, on vacant land is how it started off. He spoke with you as well, and that was the information that he provided to me, that it's assessed as vacant land without a house on it.
No.
It sells as a vacant. I think that's
Okay, so I think the question may, and I don't know because I'm not sure which one it is, but usually when we're talking about land, what we've been talking to property owners about is that there is a value for land and there's a value for improvements. When we value land, we have to value them as if vacant, meaning don't factor in the house. The land has its own value. Start there, then build on top of that. So there's that is just the approach that's taken to valuing and allocating land to buildings. I'm not sure what the.
That answer.
Okay,
that
yeah, I wasn't
basically
sure.
answers that I was trying to ask. Thank you.
Okay.
But earlier you mentioned with that, because that's a state requirement. Can you go into that a little bit more? Explanation?
As far
a
as
state of
it-
Wisconsin requirement that it has to be done that way, or?
Yeah, it is just, that's what's written in our property assessment manual that's used by all assessors in the state. albeit loosely followed by some.
Okay. Thank you, and that's all I have for right now.
Alderman Craig, then Alderman Piccarelli.
Thank you. I only have one question, and we touched on this in the last time that you presented to us regarding externalities.
Sure.
Where you have properties such as the ones on Hawthorne or that are abutting the quarry.
Yep.
How is that taken into the assessment for both the land and the home when those are kind of unique situations where those sorts of externalities wouldn't be applied to a like property 4 blocks in any direction? How do you kind of square that circle as far as that goes?
That's a you question.
Yeah, that is a good question. So when we look at those externalities, to use that word, we look at sales first, and we try to determine, does it work in our model? And an example I think that's come up a lot is the noise from the rock, or the noise from, or traffic from a street, or any of those type of. This is not a single family home in a cul-de-sac. This is a different type of animal, right? And at the end of the day, we have to look at how do they sell and how does our model work for those sales. If there's a noise thing you brought up, can we find sales that are not working with our models? And if so, can we pinpoint the reason that it's not working to that externality? If we can't, or if it's kind of a sword that cuts both ways type of thing, then it's not something that we can necessarily adjust for or model for, because then we start to lose equity, or equitability rather, or fairness among different areas. I'm sorry.
No, I was just to add to that, we did look at the ones that you're mentioning. So we did look at sales north of Rawson. We looked at sales of homes by the quarry. And what we're looking for, as Scott mentioned, was a difference between what our model produces in value and what has sold. And if we see a quantifiable difference, we can look at that and go, okay, that's probably what's going on here. These are selling for 10% less than what we have them assessed for. We likely need to make a change, and not just on one property, but all of the ones impacted. In the absence of that, it's very difficult for us to make an arbitrary adjustment. So,
What would be, in a neighborhood like that, where would you kind of delineate as far as this is where, for the example with the quarry, this is where the impact stops? How are you able to kind of suss that out in a neighborhood where not all property, where, okay, 8 properties in a certain area are affected? How far wide does that go before you say this is too far and this wouldn't affect it because you're not as close as a property that's much closer to the source?
So ones that we did notice for adjustments were traffic, and that's like on 27th. If you're residential and you're on 27th or on Highway 100 or something in those areas, we were able to say your sales are here lower than where they would be even a block in or something, or not fronting that or driveway. Yeah, exactly right. From a noise perspective, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself from previous conversation, but we've done heat studies in other municipalities for certain, like I use Lambeau Field as an example, right? As you get closer to Lambeau Field, it's obviously more desirable, and you need to see how. We have to see that there is an impact first before we study how far that impact goes.
and that's limited by sales too. So we're looking at what's available for sales if we have nothing. It's hard for us to make that inference. I can say, yeah, I feel like it should impact it. But if I don't have a sale that tells me that, I can't just pick a number and apply it because I think it should be there. I have to defend it. She has to defend it. Any assessor has to defend that.
So in the absence of sales, my neighborhood, not a lot of properties up for sale. How does that kind of work in terms of changing what both home and land value are kind of, because if everything's static, how does that change where everyone in the neighborhood is saying like, hey man, 48% increase, what's up with that? And if there's no sales going on, how does that kind of jive with that?
Well, I can say we didn't have any neighborhoods that had no, we had sales in at least every neighborhood, but they were,
Just a quick clarification. What most people use for the term neighborhood is a couple block radius or maybe a kind of half mile. We broaden that scope to use the same word neighborhood. There are 8 what we delineated as neighborhoods in the city of Franklin, and those will be included in our packet that we'll end up doing. But so when you're saying neighborhood, you're probably talking in your maybe subdivision.
Yep.
When we say neighborhood, and when Nicole was, I think, just about to give an answer, which I'll allow in a second, but she's talking about the broader area. Yeah, wow. So anyway,
And
just
I think
think
that's
globally.
kind of
Yeah.
have those definitions. As
Yeah,
well.
right.
definitely.
You know, everyday parlance versus what you use in your professional
Certainly.
capacity sort of says as far as what a neighborhood kind of
Absolutely.
constitutes. So,
Yep. And I think previously the neighborhood information that we received from the prior assessor data, I think I even mentioned it at the last meeting. I think there were almost 100 neighborhoods, which is completely overkill. It's way too many. There's not, I mean, you have a lot of subdivisions, sure, but within subdivision areas, there are similarities. You can certainly group them much bigger, and that's what we did. And group them in similar amenities, similar lot sizes for the most part, similar aged homes, and group them that way.
thank you.
Alderman Picarelli.
So mine's more of a question around, right now, I think my question was going to be, original question was kind of your backlog, right? So you got 261 that have contacted and kind of where we're at, and it sounds like we're only about a day back, which is great. I guess my statement or my question is going to be, if that starts to get bigger, right, we get a lot more people that are contacting you and you get to be more delayed, is there a way that you can kind of get that information out as to roughly we're 3 days behind or 4 days or 5 days behind? So at least people, when they're contacting, know that you're
Absolutely.
due and you
Yes.
expect it this much.
I think we discussed possibly changing our voicemail because that's the easiest. Then when they call, we did try to put it on the letter as well. Please allow us some time to respond. We will call everybody back in the order that they called, but possibly changing our voicemail to just indicate that there is a delay and to not expect a call for maybe 2 days or 3 days if that's where we're at. We can certainly do that so that they know right away when they leave that message that it might be a couple days.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, just setting expectations on
Yeah.
when they're contacted. So
And I
thank
think our biggest difficulty, I think, has been just for phone calls because we don't want to call people in the evening if we don't have to. But emails we're doing up till like 2 o'clock in the morning. So those ones are easier to get back to people. And we do that at nights and weekends, but phone calls, not so much. So.
All right, I yield.
Good, okay. Alderman Day, then. Oh,
These are quick. I'm just going to ask if there's a couple of things that we might be able to add to the website for data. Would these graphs be available so that people can, when they say, my assessment went up, 16%, 20%,
Sure.
5%, they can kind of see where that's grouped. I think that would be helpful
Absolutely.
for people to see how many, people are kind of in a similar situation. You also mentioned that you were here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for walk-ins. What are the hours of that?
8 to 4. I think we didn't specify it
Okay.
on there, and I think the clerk's office asked us that today, but 8 to 4.
Okay. And then my third and final question is, you mentioned your neighborhood map. Is that something that can be put on the website? So when you're saying that, a neighborhood delineation, things were similar, that people can
Sure.
see what that actually looks like,
Certainly.
then they'll know kind of where things were being compared and contrasted.
Quick follow-up question. Would you, and maybe this is just a broader thought, would you prefer it on the webpage directly, or would you prefer that in somewhere else, like on the assessor? You go to the assessor page and boom, there you are. I don't know. As a taxpayer, what would you like?
I would say wherever you think it's most useful.
Okay.
But I just think it would be helpful since these are, sentences and statements that
Yeah.
we're throwing around up here and that I've seen in email communications that, and since you said it's not the typical like neighborhood that you think of, it's bigger than that. I
Yeah.
think it'd be helpful for people to see kind of what those radiuses look like.
Right.
We can work with Lisa.
Yeah, I think we can get that on the website at a minimum, right on the assessor page.
Yeah, right.
The landing page.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Answer your question, yes, on the assessor's page.
Straight away. Fair enough.
Done.
Yep.
Mr. Barber.
When you say you're available for walk-ins, typically what goes on? What are you sharing information at that point?
It's the same process that we take with phone calls and emails, is that, property owners can ask us any questions. We try to answer everything, explain how we arrived at our value. A lot of times these appointments are just gathering more information, them giving us stuff we didn't know. A lot of it is history of the house, history of what's happened, circumstances that are different on their property that we may not have known. We certainly cannot be experts on somebody's house more than they are. So that's typically it. I think today we had 8 people walk in. And that's, a lot of people are calling, a lot of people are emailing. That's pretty normal. But we still like to have that walk-in opportunity for people who don't want to take that approach. That's totally fine. That's why we have those days set aside.
So in order to get better information for people that maybe do have issues or concerns, it's email, phone calls, and walk-ins.
Yep,
That's
yep.
good. Now, separate from that, there's an appeal process too that can be used. I'm not sure the dates on that and the timing of that, but that's something that is also available for people that do question their assessments.
Yep.
So I'm sure we have to do some work to get that information out as well.
That information is on the letter, and that's required to be on the letter. And step 1 for any property owner, if they disagree with their assessment or they're concerned or just have questions, is talk to us. That's our job.
Right on the sheet.
Yep, talk to us. The stage, yeah.
Let people know that there's an appeal process.
Yep, there is. And after they've discussed with us, if we get to a point where we've explained, they've explained, and we just don't agree, that's fine. That's when the appeal process takes place. You can certainly, then they can file an appeal at Board of Review.
And that
But
process would be largely through
the clerk's office,
right.
yep.
That timeline is published for the review board.
You have your notice
Yeah,
out, I think.
yes.
Yeah, it's all.
The meeting date is public, and it was also on the notice.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
On the floor. Mr. Piccarelli and then me.
Just one other question. So as you've been going through all this, I know you have the models that you have that everything runs through, and essentially it's all the property information you had for every property that goes through the model. I'm assuming, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but
Nope,
that
that's
goes through the
correct.
model and it gives you your valuations. As you've been going through these 261, has it only been, we'll say, the attributes or the data that's need to be corrected? You haven't had to make any changes to models at this point?
Yes, I would say 99% have been corrections of data error. I would say 1% is just unique properties that really wouldn't be captured by a model in the first place. We've had a couple of those, and it just, you deal with those individually and figure out what's an appropriate approach for value. But I think I would say largely it's incorrect data.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, a few things, but number one, again, thank you for coming in, and I've watched you in action the last couple days with everything going on. We've communicated a few times about things that I've been able to pull you aside, that I've had some calls from citizens, and I appreciate your timeliness and the ability to answer citizens' concerns. This letter, and I've told, people, I've said, like, take your letter, read it, understand that there's all the information to start this is right here. As much as we want to put it elsewhere and elsewhere and elsewhere, it all starts with this document. Wonderful, okay? So one other thing that I just had is, as this process goes through, if there's any way in which to get additional information out regarding anything that's obscure or whatever, this is a fluid process, but I believe it's very structured here. Thank you. I think it's very easy to follow. People that I've talked to after they've talked to you, I've asked them to give me some feedback. They're more understanding of how this process is working. And it's not the shock factor once things are explained. So that's, and fixing the errors of the past. One of which, and I'm not sure what Mr. Craig's terminology, but isn't it a hardship discount? Is that what the terminology is? If somebody says, look, I live in an X amount of area, the traffic is crazy, the noise is crazy. What's the actual term for that when they are looking for a discount on their taxes?
On their taxes, I'm not sure. 'cause
Taxes
that's
or
not us.
Oh, there's
assessment or taxes?
there's
Okay.
assessment.
There's no technical, we have different codes for our various adjustments. Wetlands, for example, would be coded a restriction, and it's wetlands. And if it's, I can't, sewer and water, right? Drinking water, sewer. So we kind of code our restrictions that way, so that we can kind of drill down as we go. How many adjustments are for general restrictions? Okay, of those, how many are adjusted for wetlands? How many adjusted for easements or something, or conservation easements or something like that? So there's no one size fits all hardship necessarily. The kind of catch-all, if we don't have a specific code, would be maybe market adjustment, I guess.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of those
Okay,
though. So
that's
yeah,
fine.
no, there isn't really. It's pretty specific. And I always tell property owners, I walked through a house today and I said, I understand the difficulty of this property, but for me to adjust it, it needs to make sense. Because if I have another property owner that says, hey, why'd you take off 10% here, 15% here? I now have to explain it. And if I don't have a good explanation, I shouldn't have done it in the first place. So everything that we do, we try to quantify, we put good notes on it, and we make sure that anybody else looking at it, whether it's a future assessor or a property owner, understands what that adjustment is. And that's, otherwise we just don't adjust it.
Thank you. Anyone else at this point? Anything, closing comments?
I do have one. So this has come up a little bit, and it's something we talked about briefly, and it's kind of looking forward. I think because most property owners are very familiar with a revaluation every year process, it would be helpful to probably give advance notice that it will not be a revaluation year next year or the following, because I think we will get a lot of calls or a lot of concerns why they haven't received their letter next year. So in a maintenance year, we won't be sending letters to everybody for revaluation purposes. And I think that might be something that needs to be considered as far as advance notice goes for next year, because it is a change.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. There was no action on that, so we're gonna move it to 1A. G1A, remember there was a few changes in this, and Oak Creek Franklin School Joint District Information Presentation with regard to a referendum question to be on the November 5th, 2024 election ballot. Shall the Oak Creek Franklin Joint School District, Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, be authorized to issue pursuant to Chapter 67 of Wisconsin Statutes General Obligation Bonds in the amount not to exceed $34,300,000 for the public purpose of paying the cost of a school building and faculty improvement project consisting of construction of, in addition to the 9th grade Center for Community Pool, a competition pool, and a related parking lot, and site improvements, renovations to the old pool, including to convert it to a weight room, safety and security improvements, including to construct an enclosed walkway between 9th grade center and the high school, district-wide capital maintenance and building infrastructure improvements, and acquisition of furnishings, fixtures, and equipment with a question mark. Good evening and welcome. If you would simply state your name and business address, which could be the school of your choice, for the record, and speak really close into it. You can bring it right up to you. Uh-oh.
Good evening. My name is Heather Ryan. Our address is 7630 South 10th Street in Oak Creek.
I'm Blaze Paul. I'm the Director of Business Services for Oak Creek Franklin School District.
Good evening and welcome. So you've got the floor, and then if you do your presentation, there'll be some questions from electeds, and then we'll go from there.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for the work you do. I know a lot of sensitivity around taxes, as I just witnessed, and assessments. And we are, obviously, Oak Creek Franklin School District is a taxing entity, being the educational organization that covers that space. So tonight we're here to talk about a little bit of the pool on what is on the referendum November 5th. And we're just going to go through a little bit of history on how we got here, and then where we're at, what it is proposed to be, and then give you some additional some finance pieces to it, and then what the next steps are, and kind of leave with a timeline. So first, again, this is Heather Ryan. She's the director of Oak Creek Recreation, and I'm the business officer for the school district. We're going to go through the community input that we got, current pool conditions that we have, the plan for the space, what's on the ballot, the investment, and then take any questions that you have. So the first thing we did to do our due diligence, we know, first off, our pool is over 60 years old at Oak Creek Franklin High School. And the pool's been having several issues, some of which are rather detrimental, where we've had to sleeve a underground pipe and in order to keep groundwater from coming in. That fix has a limited time, and after that, we can't re-sleeve it. So we're really at the point where this needs to be addressed. So we went out to the community. We tested a few options as far as do we refurbish the current pool? Do we add a new competition pool? Or do we add a new competition pool along with a community pool? And through those options, the outcome of the survey was that the majority wanted a community pool with a competition pool. And we'll talk a little bit about what that would bring as far as options for our community members. In the process, we put together a splash squad, as we call it, group of a variety of community members, and they went and they visited Greenfield Pool. Greenfield is a competition-only pool. They went to Racine Unified, where they have an aquatic center. That aquatic center is a community pool and a competition pool in one space. And then they toured our current pool to really figure out what are the restrictions, what are the challenges in our current pool. Our current pool was built in 1962. 55 years is the useful life of that pool. We have now exceeded that, and we're starting to see the elements of age where we've hit that point where we're getting close to the expiration. So that's where it's like, all right, what do we do? What's the next step? Hence this process. The pool, if you've been there, it is hard to find. It's kind of tucked in the lower part of the high school. There's no direct entrance from the outside. There's everything that you see there is the same as it was in 1962 for the most part. Maybe the diving blocks are different, but the tile are the same. The drinking fountains are the same. This is the pool that was there when there were 900 students in the high school. We're currently at about 2,200 students in that high school. We do have significant challenges with even keeping WIAA events in there with very slim lanes. So we're looking at, in a new pool, we'd make it so that those lanes are adequate and we can have a safer environment for our students and our community that use it. The locker room is dated. There's just a challenging time with that pool as it currently exists, not to mention the fact that we're having longevity issues that actually, I think it was about 3 summers ago, we had to shut it down all summer because of having to sleeve that pipe. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
So our yearly use of our pool is actually the second most used facility in the school district. We offer lifeguarding classes to students there, Phy-Ed classes for about 980 students every year. We have a men's and women's swim team. We also use it for Oak Creek Community Ed and Rec aquatic lessons, club swim for almost 1,462, almost 1,500 participants every year. We run our summer camp, and those swimmers are from our summer camps, 950 swimmers every summer. And we also offer open swim and lap swim for the community to the tune of about 625 swimmers every year.
And that's being done with the current pool where it is with limited hours. Because right now community can't use that pool during the school day or when the student athletes are in there. So based on the survey results and the Splash Squad work, what we're proposing that is on the ballot for November 5th is a pool that has a competition pool as well as a community pool. That community pool will have its own dedicated entrance for the community to come in during the school day. That community pool will not be used by students of the team. They're going to stay in the competition pool area. So just for reference,
Yeah.
this can travel. Nice.
Would you like a high-powered
Oh,
pointer?
look at this, he's got a pointer.
That's even better.
We'll be careful, and I need it back. It's the only one we got.
Which one is? Oh, right here?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So this part here is the second floor to this, and really it's just this part. This is where the viewing community that will come up and watch the swim meets, it's going to be overlaid on this section. So the community itself will have a dedicated entrance. Right now it's proposed to come in. If you know the area, this right here is the 9th grade center. And then right now the students actually walk between the 9th grade center and the high school throughout the day, several times. And it's very common, and you have 10th graders that go to the 9th grade center kids that go to the 10, 12, because we have a very integrated program. It's really challenging safety-wise to have kids walking outside several times during the day.
Yeah.
Over here is the high school part. So this would actually not only be the competition pool, community pool, but also an enclosed walkway that goes between the two schools. So it's truly going to make it from a 9th grade center with a 10-12 building into a true 9-12 high school campus. So in the middle of the two will be this pool. So the pool here is 8 lanes. It's the width of the lanes meet the WIA standards. Upgrades in safety, diving. We don't have a dedicated diving well per se. Those tend to be rather outdated. That's not how they do things anymore with pools, but there is a diving board here that we'd have to close these 2 lanes off when they do their diving events, which is pretty typical for pools nowadays. It's just more cost effective to not have to dedicate square footage just for diving. Over here, this is going to be a dividing wall between the 2 pools that allow the community to have access to the community pool without getting into where the students will be throughout the day. So this is, by and large, it was driven by the input that we got through the survey, and then the Splash Squad looking at different schools and what they have to offer and the pools that those communities have. There will be additional parking up top that we'd be adding. Currently, the footprint that this pool would be put on is a staff parking lot. That staff parking lot would be diverted down over here, and then currently students are parking there. That would end up moving over to the other side of the campus. If you know, the Oak Creek Community Center is over here, and then again, 9th grade center is over here.
The community room, maybe?
Yes, there will be a community room added as well, so kind of trying to maximize the space to use. They can use it during birthdays. They can do different events in there. So it's really trying to expand the scopes, that it's not just a school facility. It's going to be a community facility that does school things and community things. And I think the biggest thing is that it'll operate during the school day. The other, I guess, the biggest thing, quite frankly, just based on the feedback that we've gotten, in particular at some of the retirement communities that we go and visit and tell them about this, they're very excited. I don't know if you are aware, WIAA has stipulations on how the water needs to be maintained temperature-wise. So you're looking at around, I think,
82.5 degrees in a competition pool. The warm water pool would be closer to 90 degrees, 88 to 89 degrees. So much warmer, and it also has 0 depth entry, so people would be able to walk into it with their children in their arms, or be able to be wheeled into it. If they had a water accessible wheelchair, walk in easily if they had any issues. And walk in easily if they had any issues.
Yeah, what Heather was referring to is that 0 depth entry. So the depth here would be 0. They can walk in. There will be 2 full lanes over here for the community to use, and then this will be, more easy access for those community members that are a little more challenged.
So what this means for the community, the warm water pool really is a nice feature. It allows people to be able to learn to swim or be using the pool longer in their life. The competition pool that we have is hard to teach in. It's hard to learn in, especially for those young swimmers. The shallow area for instruction will be really nice because it will be able to have people using that pool that maybe wouldn't have otherwise. Right now, our pool is 4 feet deep. inconsistently, this would be a nice shallow area for them to learn. Zero depth entry, important. The community room also for some of our senior programs, our yoga classes, our senior fitness classes could all happen in there. Separate locker rooms for public and students is really important. Right now, we have locker rooms that don't have any privacy at all. It's difficult for people to come in there and change to go into the pool or bring their children in to change. So that gives us some family locker room space as well. Ample deck space so that people can be on the deck. We can host competitions and swimmers would be able to be on the deck while competition is going on. Natural light right now, our swimming pool is inside of a building. We've kind of built around the pool, and so we don't have any natural light coming in. Handicap accessibility is difficult in our pool right now, and daytime hours for public use is really kind of the premier piece of this, is that we can close off and separate those two entities completely. We offer swimming lessons right now, but now we would be able to offer swimming lessons during the day for young children or for seniors who'd want to take classes as well. And community parking that's dedicated for the community to use.
All right, so that all sounds really good, great. It's going to help the community, but the challenging thing for me is trying to figure out a way to pay for that. And one of the things that I want to make sure is that we try to make this as tax neutral as possible. So what we've actually been doing in Oak Creek Franklin for the last several years is we do have debt that's outstanding. That debt is for the 9th grade center, it's for Forest Ridge, other things that have passed in the past that we now have been paying off. And one thing that the blue part is kind of what I would equate to your mortgage. So that's the mortgage payment you pay every month for your house. The green is the part that we've been paying in addition to in order to get ahead on the principal. When we get ahead on the principal, we actually save about 35 cents on the dollar because we're not leaving that principal outstanding until 2040. So if we stopped altogether doing, this is called defeasing debt. If we stopped defeasing debt, these blue bars will go all the way out to 2040. So what we've been doing, our debt strategy for the last several years has been paying more on that principal, reduce that interest exposure, and keep it level over time. So that's kind of what we've been doing. Now, this is where it gets a little creative because we're looking at this need of a pool and trying to figure out a way that the last thing we want to do, especially with assessments that have gone up, the big key other than the assessment value of a house is going to be what is the tax levy that the municipality is levying. And that's both the school district, the city, the county, MATC. So all of those go into a tax bill. We only impact the school portion. So what we want to do is keep our tax for debt level over time. And so right now, this is an example of this year where we have our defeasance with our principal payment, or a regular payment, if you will. And what we're proposing as far as getting this funded in a way that's tax neutral overall from a year-to-year basis is to actually pause the defeasance practice that we've been doing and instead be very aggressive with the pool debt. Anything we do right now with issuing debt is going to be at a higher interest rate than what was done in 2015 and whatnot. So what we're looking at doing is actually pausing that defeasance process, allowing the pool to take place instead, be aggressive with that debt, get it paid off, and then continue our defeasances after it's paid off. And ultimately, with that process, we'll be debt-free by 2035. So it's a little bit of a different way to approach it than saying we're going to pay our mortgage payment, we're going to defease debt, and we're going to do a pool. That would increase taxes year over year, and we're trying to avoid that because we know that we have a need that we need to take care of, but we want to do it in a way that isn't going to increase people's taxes from the standpoint, and this is very important to understand, from the standpoint of a debt levy. So within our debt, this process, we'd have a flat levy for debt. The one thing we don't control is the operating levy, because as most municipalities, the operating levy is heavily influenced by Madison. So it depends what happens in Madison. That'll dictate what happens with the operating side of the levy. But with the debt levy, we do control that. And this is where our structure would be, if a successful referendum happens, we would prioritize the pool debt to be paid off rather quickly, and then continue our defeasances, and ultimately in Oak Creek Franklin, we would be out of debt by 2035. So you kind of read the question. It's a rather lengthy question, but this is what's on the ballot on November 5th. And these are our upcoming, the absentee ballot voting process that's out there. And then, of course, Election Day on November 5th. Do I add anything on?
No, that's.
Okay, so we're going to open this up for questions. Alderwoman Day?
And thank you for coming in. I appreciate your pivoting on
for having
short
us.
notice to come and present. I represent District 4, so a good chunk of my district does pay into the Oak Creek Franklin School District, which is why I reached out to you. So I'm just going to ask you the same 3 questions that I asked Franklin School District that was here 2 weeks ago. The first was, as I drive around different municipalities and I'm seeing improvements that are being made to athletic facilities, performing arts facilities and whatnot, sometimes you'll see the name of a business on the side of it, like a sponsorship kind of thing. Has anybody approached you or have you approached anyone about any potential sponsorships to try to offset some of the costs like other school districts have done?
We do currently have a sponsor. It's not public, though, at this point.
Okay. And then I appreciate the creativity that you're using to try to offset some of the costs here. So during the presentation from the Franklin School District, they had a graphic that said, for, every, $1,000 of your home, this is how much your taxes would go up. So $100,000 home, $200,000, so on and so forth. Do you have a similar graphic for that, or are you're stating that you are right now all square
Yeah, that's actually
as far as this portion of the school district?
correct, because it's the debt levy. So we can control the debt levy within the structure. But again, that's where I want to make sure everyone knows it's tax neutral from an annual year-to-year basis, but it's not tax neutral over time, because obviously we're putting tax resources to this instead of doing it to a defeasance. And in doing that,
You're spreading.
yes,
longer.
exactly. Yep.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, as far as mill rate goes for your school district, do you know, as far as other districts in the area, where you rank? Are you sort of in the middle, on the high end, on the low end? I'm not expecting you to know the exact number, but do you know kind of approximately where you fall?
Yeah, I think we're 7.66. I got our state aid cert today. So, so I'm finishing that up. Right now, this isn't totally public, but our projected levy will be going down about $1.5 million for the school district. So I can't, and that's all levies. So our operating levy, our debt levy, Fund 80 levy. So ours should be going down. It doesn't mean it's the same everywhere. It all depends on that state aid cert and where all the districts fall.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that number. That is an important number to have out there if you know it. And the third question I have, you answered it fabulously. I appreciate the return on investment for this, that you really took the community into consideration for the extra space and providing space for them to be able to use the new facilities. Other presentations that we've had have not made that consideration. So I do appreciate that for this one, you are putting a return on investment to the community. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you.
Mr. Barber?
As a follow-up to that, how do you define community? Is it a geographic community? Is it somewhat open-ended? What do you say is community?
So when we consider our residents, and if they are able to participate or would like to participate, residents are considered those people that live in the city of Oak Creek and those that live in the Oak Creek Franklin School District. So those 500 families that live within Franklin. And it's a question that we ask on registration, at time of registration.
So a portion of Franklin would be eligible?
Yep. If you're living in our school district area, then you're considered a community member resident. All community members are welcome to join us. There's an additional fee for those that are non-residents.
Yeah, our programs in our recreation fund, we try to structure them, and actually we do more than break even. So we try to make sure we cover the costs that actually it takes to operate the programs. So that would be no different with the pool.
Anyone else? Mr. Craig?
Yes, if you could go back to the slide regarding your projected defeasance with the That one, right there. So when you talk about how you're gonna be like super duper aggressive for about 6 years, paying off the debt for the pool, and then you're gonna go back to previous debt and pay that down, what is to stop you from saying that on where you have, you know, in 2032, you know, gee whiz, you know, we're super aggressive, we're in a really good spot now. What's to stop you from saying, you know what? We don't have that great of a carryance of, as far as our debt goes. We have now this other stuff to kind of address in the future where, you know, where Franklin Public Schools is looking to expand in terms of, you know, trade spaces for auto labs and stuff like that. Would that be a future consideration for Oak Creek Franklin? Or is it where we're looking at 2035 and being like, you know what, no more credit cards, we're done. You know, we're not moving forward with taking on more debt in the future.
That's a great question, and it's a question I've gotten a few different times, and I actually like that question because I like to be debt free. My previous district I was in was South Milwaukee, and before I left there, I was there for 16 years. I was able to get down to 2 years of debt left, and then it would be gone. So my successor, I think, is now enjoying being debt free. So the answer to that is, it's good for Oak Creek Franklin from the standpoint of we've done a lot. We've got the 9th grade center. We've got Forest Ridge Elementary. We've got East Middle School. We are very active on an annual basis having a capital improvement fund of close to 1.6 million that we're putting into our buildings every year out of our operating budget. The goal of doing that is that we avoid having things come up and it's like, oh, we want to do this. Let's make a referendum out of it and go to the voters. We're trying to preempt that. And I think, quite frankly, the support that we've gotten from Oak Creek Franklin community before me, of course, when those other referendums passed, has been significant enough that this is kind of how it was told to me, was this is like the last piece of the master facilities plan is to update the pool. So I personally don't see anything popping up that says we need this. However, time can change things. If there's a new industry that comes out that we aren't equipped to handle, you know, bringing in students and getting them the experience in that industry, and it causes us to have to add things, it could go that way. But I would think it would be more likely, depending on the capacity or the dollar amount needed, it's more likely that it would probably be handled under the capital improvement plan.
Gotcha. And so your capital improvement plan then, how is that something that you're in like year 4 of, or is this something where you are
Annually. It's a lot of it is ongoing maintenance. So air handler that's on its last leg, you know, we've been putting roofs that have leaks that are like, all right, these leak calls are starting to add up. We have to address that section of roof. So then we put that into that capital improvement plan. It's fluid. For the most part, we know what's probably going to be happening next year, but then the following year, and we go out 10 years, it gets a little fluid.
That was kind of where I was going, is that you have usually a 10-year capital improvement plan. Where are you as far as that goes before you have to reassess as far as what would be priority-wise in your CIP?
I would guess we're probably 3 years out from doing kind of a new assessment and reviewing everything, because there's going to be things that were probably on the cusp last time that now would move in. But the biggest thing I think is that at least everything that I've seen, we're not looking at, we need a new building. We need to replace all of our buildings are in really good shape. Again, the community did an outstanding job with the last referendum investments where they added gymnasiums to a number, actually most of the elementary schools. I think the only ones that they didn't was Forest Ridge because it was relatively new. And Deerfield, yeah. So outside of that, I don't really see anything else big coming down the pike. The biggest thing would probably be our HVAC system at the high school. But again, the plan there is to tackle that through capital improvement.
You were talking about like the tech labs and construction labs and those changes that they're making in Franklin now. Those had been addressed in our last referendum. So we've got all of that already underway.
Super. Thank you.
See no one else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be moving forward. It's just leave my pointer there, young man.
Very handy.
Yes. Nope.
No.
By design. G2 and D4. Standard findings and decision of the City of Franklin Common Council upon the application of John Spitz, Fox Glen Corporate Center LLC applicant for a special exception to certain natural resource provisions of the City of Franklin Unified Development Ordinance. Good evening, Marion X from Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to briefly remind the Common Council what this application is about, it is a request for an exception to our natural resource standards to allow for a grading plan to the site so that there can be some corrections made to a fill pile that was placed there and do some other prep work on the site. So the applicant is requesting to do work within the wetland setback and buffer that requires the NRSE. During the review of this application, planning found that there were violations of our floodplain ordinance that do need to be resolved that were not within the scope of the NRSE. And so we did some work, and the city attorney has helped arrive at a condition that addresses that concern, but also allows the applicant to complete this current review and move ahead with the development of the site. So there's a revised condition 4. Thank you, city attorney, for your help with that. And if there are any questions from the body, I'm happy to answer them now.
Questions, concerns?
Just real quick.
Yes, Alderman Day.
So in looking at condition 4, it says, must obtain a land use permit to resolve changes to the floodplain within 36 months of approval. And I know that this has been an ongoing development project for years and years and years. What happens if we don't get there within 36 months?
Then we would have to enter into an enforcement process.
Okay, and the applicant is aware of that timeline and what the consequences would be if for some reason this date can't be met.
Mr. City Attorney.
Or the applicant would do what's required.
Correct. I just make sure that it's
Ideally.
that everyone is aware of
And
the.
the applicant's attorney is nodding his head in the audience.
Excellent. That was, I just crossing all T's and dotting all I's. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
First and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. G3, acquisition of MRAP armored rescue vehicle for the Franklin.
G2A.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have a 2A in here. Let me see. Did it get crazy? 2. Is there no divider here? Okay, I have a 2A. I'm sorry, I have a 2A. I didn't have the divider. That's okay, that's on me. I think somebody told me I didn't have a divider, and I scoffed at them. I don't need a divider, I'll remember that. I didn't. An ordinance to amend section. You're right. That's why I didn't think like that. In order to amend section 15-3.0434 of the Unified Development Ordinance, Planned Development District Number 29, Wellness Center Marquis Carsons and Inc. to allow educational services as a permitted use and to allow a building addition and site changes, Islamic Society of Milwaukee applicant, Islamic Foundation of Greater Milwaukee property owner, 8910 South 102nd Street. Mr. Fuchs, good evening and welcome.
Hi. This is, as you stated, an amendment to PDD number 29. It's considered a major amendment as it's a change in use. It's essentially a high school is proposed within the former theater building at this property. This ordinance would allow educational services as a permitted use to accommodate the high school. That replaces the specific permitted use of indoor movie theater. And then the ordinance also updates the references, the exhibits. The PD currently references, has exhibits for the site plan, landscape plan, lighting, those type of things. So those exhibits and references get updated to the plans submitted by the applicant. And the Plan Commission recommended approval. They also approved a site plan amendment for the changes, the building addition. The applicant's adding landscaping to the site and making some parking modifications.
Questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We have a first and a second by Alderman Hussein. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Now, we're going to go to item G3. Acquisition of a MRAP armored rescue vehicle for the Franklin Police Department. This will be a roll call vote. Good evening, Chief and Captain, welcome. If you break it, you buy it, and you've got better stuff, than us.
Right. All right. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, hopefully? Is that on?
Yeah, just
way
break,
up.
right.
Way up. Hello. Is that better? All right. All right. You have in front of you a unique opportunity for the department. We've been looking to acquire an armored rescue vehicle for quite some time. To purchase new, they're very expensive. You're looking between probably $300,000 and $400,000. This piece of equipment is currently being used by the Waukesha Police Department. They no longer need it because they have acquired said new vehicle in that same dollar range. I don't know if you guys have any particular questions. Obviously, I kind of laid out quite a bit of information in the packet. As far as use, it is a rescue vehicle. Protects occupants from all types of gunfire of all caliber. Could also be used for rescue, natural disasters, floods, deep snow events. If you have maybe like, God forbid, a plane crash in like a farm field somewhere, this would help us get to that location. And there are currently 37 similar vehicles being used throughout the state by law enforcement agencies, so this is not something that is new.
Thank you, Chief. So I'll start, because there's a couple of questions, and you and I have talked about this.
Sure.
And then I'll yield to the Director of Finance. But, so this vehicle is very heavy, and there would be some challenges. Some of the outward challenges to this is rolling up on a residential property, and perhaps the weight would have a negative impact on sidewalks, driveways, and if you went off that area, I mean, I wouldn't want to see this going to the cornfield like you mentioned, but let's say you went into an area, that thing would be buried like, and then we'd have an issue with that.
Depends.
So, as much as I support it and like it, and you and I have talked about this, if you could perhaps address, let's say, okay, we get it for free, and then now we have it, and how is it maintained with your current budget? Briefly, just go over that, perhaps how operators would be trained, what your anticipated annual maintenance would be for this, and we're not charged, and then let's say now another PD wants it, then they would take it, let's say you get an opportunity to get a Bearcat, and then there's no charge to that next agency as long as you give it to another agency.
Correct. Yes. We obviously did our research ahead of time before we sought this type of vehicle. Obviously, it currently does operate in the city of Waukesha. So there are some challenges that they outlined because obviously their urban environment is a lot tighter than ours. So there are some places that it maybe can't operate, but it's not a normal patrol vehicle. Obviously, you're not going to see this very often. I would, in comparison, I would call it like a ladder truck for the fire department, right? Not something you're going to use often, but when you need it, you need it. As far as maintenance goes, I have talked with the chiefs of the Village of Hills Corners and Village of Greendale. Because they are part of our joint SWAT team, and this vehicle would see use probably in both those jurisdictions. They've committed to at least $1,500 a year from each department towards the maintenance. As far as annually how much it would cost, that's a very difficult thing to say because there's not a lot of routine maintenance on these vehicles. Remember, they're built for the military, so they are very rugged. Obviously, your oil change and stuff like that. Waukesha recently replaced the brakes, so the brakes on it are brand new. It also comes with 4 tires, which has a cost to it as well. But we consistently asked several different departments, what is this going to cost us per year to operate? And they consistently said they don't have a lot of problems. So they didn't really have an answer for us as far as, it costs $4,000 a year or something like that. We could not find that answer. But I'm confident that if we get that $1,500 from each village per year, and keep that in a revolving account, I think we should be fine from the information we have.
And continuing, so that was kind of my, ringing a bell kind of concern. Now, the positive, huge positive, with our schools, and if there is a very unfortunate active shooter situation, this is what you want. This is what you want in your community, not borrowing it, not looking for a driver from XYZ department. You've got a rapid response with our trained SWAT members to address an active shooter now. And that's one of the things, that's why I really support this, because I think that serves the greater good. I think the other jurisdictions learning now that it's $1,500 a year, you can squeeze them a little more, maybe we can bump them and do something. But that's where I really support this. Mr. Barber.
Just, I'm like you, I'm totally.
Your mark,
Just like you, I'm totally.
You're
Just
good.
like you, good.
Thumbs up is good, go.
Just like you, I'm for this, and I think it's going to be an asset. But how many times in the last year did you say to yourself, I wish we had one? Or how many times might we use it in a given circumstances, the way they evolve? What would you anticipate the use of this might be? How often will we see it on the streets?
That's a very good question. How many times have we used armor in the past couple of years, from your recollection?
In the past couple of years, roughly close to 10. If we narrow it down the last year, I can think of 3 to 5 operations where we've borrowed one and have used armor.
So it's not going to be a lot, but you need it when you need it.
Like a dive team.
Correct.
You need the dive team, it's here.
Correct.
This will be the, okay. Thank you very much.
Correct.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Thank you, Mayor. A few of my questions were already answered. Nice looking vehicle. I'm sure this has been considered, but will it fit okay in our parking garage at this station? Or will it have to sit outside?
We've looked at a couple different locations because the size and weight do present some challenges. Some alternate locations are one of the fire stations and also possibly DPW. There is a spot in our garage where we may be able to put it, but it currently has a different use. So it's, we have three
It's
different.
not outside, chief. This will never.
We will not, no.
No way.
We will not store it outside because how infrequently we hopefully infrequently use it realistically. That would lead to deterioration of tires and such. Not a great idea. It's got to be stored inside.
Thank you.
Madam Director of Finance.
You already answered my question.
Mr. Piccarelli, Alderman 1.
So we talked about it, that we'd have it essentially until we could give it to if another municipality wanted it. What happens if let's say repairs come up on it and it's like super high, or we get to a point where no one else wants it? Is there any cost with a disposal of something like that? How does that work essentially?
That's a good question. There would be a cost for disposal. However, when we asked for that answer, it's in such high demand, it's never been reached. If we, just like when Waukesha no longer needs it, it comes to us. I know there's people in line, if we don't take it, that they will. They kind of try to locate it geographically. We have been looking for a vehicle like this for a while. And one of our options earlier in the year was somewhere, I believe, in Texas, but the transportation cost to get that vehicle here is prohibitive. So the fact that this popped up so close to home is a very unique opportunity. And I will tell you that the mechanic from Waukesha does not want to depart from this vehicle. It's his baby. So I know it's very well taken care of. And Waukesha has been very much a partner in sharing all of their training materials as well. So we already have a PowerPoint that we can just pretty much put our badge on and go with for training. So I can't answer your question as to how much that would cost because it's never happened. The mechanic from Waukesha basically said this vehicle will be in service when we're all gone. It's a military vehicle. It's only, it was from 2012, and the military only used it for 2 years. So it's in great shape because Waukesha's had it since 2015. And up until recently, it was their only armored vehicle. So I don't know how much it would cost to decommission it because it's never been done before.
Thank you.
Mr. Barber.
Is this a vehicle that might show up in a parade?
Yes.
Please no.
Yes.
I've thought of that, and I don't have an answer for it because there's pros and cons to that. So I yet to be determined. How about that?
Mr. Hassan?
Yes, I just curious, as the police department start using this vehicle, do you think that in the future it becomes like required for the city to maybe purchase one? Like after they get used to having it as part of their routine equipment?
I think it's a good vehicle for introduction to our SWAT team and for patrol. Ultimately, if funding wasn't an issue, I would go with the armored vehicle that the mayor mentioned, the Bearcat. It's much smaller. It's about the size of an armored truck for like moving money. It's about that size. That would be ideal. But again, the price tag is very prohibitive. So I think this is a good start, a good introduction, knowing that we can't afford that other option. So in the future, if you guys want to write the check, I'll take the Bearcat.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
6 ayes, no noes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
G4, approval to appoint Mr. Glenn Beardsley as interim sewer and water superintendent. Let's see, this would be Madam Director of Administration. Would you like to start this? Okay, I will. So, Mr. Beardsley has been doing an exceptional job, and with the departure of Mr. Roberts, he has done everything he can to prepare himself prior to that departure to be a seamless leader, to come forth and had the wherewithal for Mr. Roberts to, please join us, to be able to move into that position through a succession plan. So he has been in that role since Mr. Roberts' departure. It's been seamless, flawless. Everything's been a positive as far as what's going on. And I'll open up the board to that. Questions? Mr. Beardsley would like to say a few things. He got warmed up in a Board of Public or Water Commissioners meeting, so.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to continue the good tradition of the utility and keep moving it forward in a positive direction and just provide the best customer service we can to the residents. I've been with the city almost 21 years this December, started with DPW, moved to sewer and water, and I've learned a lot from everyone I've worked with here at the city, and it's been a good 21 years.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a first and a second. Oh, further discussion, Alderwoman Day.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Beasley, for coming in tonight. And I want to say that your department is a small but mighty force. And I think the longevity of the majority of the people on the staff is attributable to the customer service that we've all experienced here in the city. So thank you for your time and efforts with the city. I have no issues with the interim assignment. I just have some questions about the finance piece of it. There's the discussion about the agreement established with Mark Liberta. Can you just go into more detail of exactly what that is?
That substantially predates me, and so I don't have the details of that, but do you have the details of that? That's all I had gotten, was the information that there was an agreement and that Mr. Liberta had created that agreement with Glenn, and this is the information that was provided.
It predates when the city joined the state pension. So there was a number of people with substantial balances. All those guys have retired or were paid out at a set date. I chose not to be. And at that time, Mr. Liberta, acting in the city's best interest, that if this were to ever happen, being management, you can't have comp time. It would be executed either at a promotion or separation.
Gotcha. Is this the only department that would have an agreement like that in place still, or is there other?
I think I'm the only one in the city.
Yeah.
And the comp time
I
policy
yeah,
has
I think-
changed since
Sure.
this was accumulated.
Sure,
So it's
and-
a whole different policy.
Yeah, no, thank you for explaining it. I was not aware of that policy, but, obviously, Mr. Liberto was only here for a short time when I was with the city, so it obviously predates me as well. Okay, and then we're using the merit pool for that as the plan. What do we currently have in that fund right now?
Where did we start out, 100?
I was not informed that this was going to be the use for it, so I didn't look that up prior.
Okay, thank you. I just, my concern is, and again, this has nothing to do with you, and I'm fully in support of that, and I understand the reason that this has to be paid out, now that you've explained it. It's just, I get concerned at how many times we're going to the well of the merit pool. It feels like it's a piggy bank of just this pool of money that whenever we don't know where to get money from, we're just going in there, and that's not exactly what it was designed for. So I'm very, very hopeful that with some of the discussions that the Finance Committee has taken over the last few meetings, that we can maybe start moving in a better direction with kind of what to do with that money and not have all of these one-off, I guess, withdrawals from it. I guess there's nowhere else to grab it though from, huh?
Well, I was going to say that I would assume, and this is just off the cuff, so I don't know, but I would assume that with the position that hasn't been filled and also the difference between the previous superintendent and Mr. Beardsley, there would be a amount of funds for personnel that have not been used as well.
So
Could we use that first?
again, I was just going to say, and no disrespect, I had no idea that that was even an option or if it's been discussed with finance at all. So that being said, I do recommend that before we use the merit pool, that we do look at what the vacancy looks like for the rest of the year and probably use that over using the merit pool. I do know that there would be enough to cover this. But again, if we have a better use of the vacancy, then use that.
Yeah, I guess that would be my ask, that we can look into that and try to pull that money forward first before taking it all out of the merit pool. Okay, thank you.
We are for sure doing that. Okay, I was going to add to that. So we got a first and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
Aye. 6 ayes and noes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to the big responsibility. G5, motion to approve the Director of Health and Human Services to accept the immunization COVID Supplement 3 grant period extension. Good evening, Madam Director. Welcome. If there's, want to go right into a motion, if there's questions before we?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Good. First and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. G6, motion to approve the Director of Health and Human Services to accept the 2024 Division of Public Health Consolidated Contracts to continue funding health department grants.
I'll make the motion.
Alderwoman Day and Alderman Eichmann's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lauren.
Save your voice. G7, a resolution to issue change order number 3 to Dorner, Inc. for the water transmission main, Contract A, along South Lovers Lane to reduce total project costs of $64,231. Madam Director of Finance.
This is just a change order to close out the Dorner contract. This will be Contract A. There was a reduction in the overall project cost as a reduced, not number of allowances, and a reduction in the project quantities.
Okay, Alderwoman Eichmann?
Thanks. So, just for clarification, the change order is increase the length of the bore to protect adjacent trees that would not have been affected with a shallower project. So if I'm comprehending this correctly, originally, we were going to have to use that particular area. Now we don't. Also, a question, because I know that's been mentioned quite a bit, as we started digging for that water tower, it had been mentioned that we ran into some bad soil. And now it states because the boring subcontractor encountered a drastic change to soils that significantly increased the effort to perform the work necessary. The negotiated price included 10% discount from the subcontractor on the extra labor that was expended. So this is simply to kind of make it black and white and clear. We just don't need to use as wide of a span of an area as initially thought, which is what's bringing the cost down, or?
Well,
To be quite honest,
I
I'm
mean-
not sure this is from the engineer of the project.
right.
Who's not here, obviously.
Well, we don't have one right now that can put this, if we need to get, I guess, a greater
We
clarification.
could, let's put him to work right away.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Thank you.
Mr. Beardsley, welcome back.
It was multiple things that weren't used, like we didn't add a extra hydrant, this is just the final payment. I wasn't in on all it, the whole job, but just clearing out quantities, bringing everything, what was used to the table and what wasn't used, and justifying the price, the reduction.
Yeah, the city gets a credit for what they don't use.
Okay. And this does not affect my concern at all of the potential of nearby residents to connect to the water, not to connect to the water, right? This is just completely, I had a constituent ask me to make that very clear. I thought that this has nothing to do with that nature, but I just wanted them, because I think they're listening, to hear, so thank you. And I appreciate that clarification, so thank you. With that being said, I will go ahead and make a motion to adopt the resolution.
I will second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. G8, authorize the transfer of funds and amend ordinance number 2023-2569, an ordinance adopting the 2024 annual budget for the general fund to reappropriate funds from IT data processing services to other IT non-personnel services. Good evening, Director Mikulski. You've got the floor, sir.
Basically, this is just moving funds within the IT budget itself. We are not asking for any new allocation of funds at all. We're not turning around and moving funds from another department or another fund. All of it is basically moving from the data processing services account, which has been overfunded, and we're moving it to some other accounts that would be in the red by the end of the year, just to make sure everything is in the black, and then allocating a little excess over for training and classes.
Motion to authorize the transfer of funds.
Second.
Seconded by Alderwoman Day. Roll call, please. Oh, Mr. Piccarelli.
So the conferences in schools, that one, can you just go into a little bit what that is?
Yes, we're rolling out VMware version 8. That's probably going to start on the 11th of November, and we're moving from VMware 6.7 to 8. I have been trained in VMware version 5 and version 6. I have never been trained in version 8. So me and Ryan will be going to class for VMware. Then I have Ryan and Nathan right now in Office 365 administration courses, as we're moving over to the Microsoft Cloud. So before we move to the Microsoft Cloud, it'd be certainly good to know how to actually use it before I actually go into there. So it's not like we're stumbling our way through through all the administration screens.
Thank you. Excellent. We've got a first and a second, right?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day. Aye. Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichmann.
Aye.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
6 ayes, no noes, motion carries. G9.
Thank you.
Thank you. D1, a resolution to rescind resolution number 2024-8120, a resolution for acceptance of a stormwater facilities maintenance agreement and easements for sanitary sewer, stormwater management access, and water main at 9410 South 76th Street and 7520 West Ryan Road. Tax key numbers 884-9997-000 and 884-9998-000, and to replace it with a resolution for acceptance of a stormwater facilities maintenance agreement and easements for sanitary sewer, stormwater management access, and water main at 9410 South 76th Street and 7520 West Ryan Road. Tax key numbers 884-9001-000, 884-900-2000, and 884-900-3000. Mr. City Attorney. You were on, sir. Now you're back
Subject
on.
easements were before the Common Council and approved back in March, as set forth on the action sheet since that time, with property adjustments, et cetera. Land descriptions have changed. The developer sent a highly redlined city standard form on the agreement and these easements, and it's not been the practice to change that at all. It was sent clean and redlined. I redlined everything they did, so in substance, it matches. I conferred with existing engineering staff, pointed out a couple of things on the standard form that could use some updating, nothing of substance. And so it all got boiled down where at least city attorney and engineering staff are on the same page and are okay with what's in the Common Council packet. The resolution provides, since more clarity in the exhibits that are attached is needed, and I believe exhibits B and C to the agreement are still needed. All of the exhibits were prepared by consulting Kapoor and Associates, and the Karma side is having them prepare the clearer and additional exhibits needed, which will obviously be reviewed by engineering staff.
Thank you. There is a motion presented.
I'll make the second. Or do you
We
say
need
that-
a first.
Oh, I will make the first. I thought you
Thank
said
you,
there
Alderwoman.
was. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I second.
We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Before we go into G10, why don't we take a brief recess? And that way you can get everything kind of set up here. So let's take a 5-minute break. It's 8:27. Come back at 8:30.
Recording in progress.
Tell me when green arrow alpha.
G10.
You won't say alpha. It's 8:33 PM. We are back on the record. Item G10, approval of the 2025 employee benefit related coverages. And this will be done by Madam Director of Administration.
At this time, I'm going to invite Mr. Fuller, who is our agent for insurance policies, in particular employee benefit policies, up to the table to field any questions or concerns that the Common Council may have.
So I'll start yesterday. Thank you for appearing at the Personnel Committee. I think you had some questions. They were answered. I think you did a good job, and I'm just going to give you a little hint. Yes, pull that thing real close again. It's right there. So I will open up the floor for questions at this point in time. Alderwoman Day.
Thank you. In my past life, 2 past lives ago, I was dealing with insurance quite a bit. So one of the things that I've noticed that is available to some employers that I don't believe Franklin has put into place yet, and I don't know if it's been discussed, but it's definitely not something that they're currently utilizing. It's a cost management practice of, if an employee has the opportunity to take insurance and be covered under their spouse's plan, And if they do so and provide proof of that, that they get, some sort of like small financial incentive every year for doing that. And in return on that investment, it's, a few $100s, but, overall the amount that is saved to the employer for that person not being on the insurance. Is that something that has ever been looked into or considered?
Yes, thank you for the question. It actually, a similar question came up last evening at Personnel. There are a couple of different ways. One is a spousal carve-out or spousal surcharge, where if you have a spouse, they can't be on the plan or they get a surcharge. I think what you're referencing is cash in lieu. Fairly common in the public sector, in particular public education. You have a partially self-funded health plan, so it's a little harder to quantify savings because you don't know who's going to get off. But we talked about it both with administration and the strategic planning committee that we put together and have had multiple meetings with earlier this year. So at this point, it's been talked about. It certainly is on the table. It's just not a proposal for what's in here.
Yeah, and ideally, that the pool that we have here for the city is just, it's a little small to kind of make any sort of good guess at any cost savings that might.
Yeah, and the other downside is you have a number of people, I don't know the exact number, but let's say it's approximately 50 that already waive. So you would have to apply that to them as well. So you immediately have a cost for people that actually aren't taking the plan already, because you can't discriminate.
Okay,
So.
excellent, thank you.
Mr. Barber.
I do not have a question right now because you've made an excellent presentation to the Personnel Committee last evening, along with my fellow alderpersons who approved this unanimously with the Personnel Committee. And I just would like that on the record for people that weren't at that meeting last night, that it got full approval.
Alderwoman Eichman?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for being here 2 nights in a row as well. So thanks for your time again tonight.
My pleasure.
Your
Thank you.
I'm happy to make the motion. No one else has any questions.
So we've got a first and a second. Let's do roll call on this, please.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
Aye. 6 ayes, no noes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. G11, a resolution authorizing certain officials to execute a surplus energy purchase agreement with Wisconsin Electric Power Company for the Franklin Library Building Facilities and another one for the Franklin Fire Department Building Facilities in furtherance of the Master Energy Services Agreement and the performance contract previously entered into with Johnson Controls, Inc. to implement energy efficiency, safety, security, and renewable energy measures at various city buildings and infrastructures. Madam Director of Administration, anything on this?
You're on chime in. I will. But, so essentially what this is an agreement with We Energies that we would sell them back any additional energy that we create through solar panel use. So pretty much.
Mr. City Attorney, do you have a comment on that?
And one of the JCI representatives this rolled in Friday morning. And anyway, after it was sent to the clerks for inclusion in the agenda packet, the primary representative from Johnson Controls wrote back just in terms of historical practice and what's expected here. It's unlikely that there will be much, if any, excess energy sold, but it's a positive benefit for parties.
Right.
A motion to adopt.
Excellent.
Second.
First and second, Alderwoman Eichman.
Just a quick question. What would be the selling price? Do we know offhand or no?
Depends on how much you're selling.
Yeah, it's in here. It
That's-
depends on how much you
I
sell.
must have missed that.
Kilowatt.
Okay.
She still has the floor, and then Mr. Peccarelli.
That's all I had. I yield. Thank you.
Mr.
Okay.
Peccarelli,
And I just need to state that I need to abstain due to my employer.
we will have an abstention due to your request regarding employer. We have a first and a second. Why don't we do roll call on this? It makes it easier for me.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Alderman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Berger.
Abstain.
5 ayes, no nos, 1 abstention. Motion carries. G12, Finance Committee recommended changes to the 2020 Mayor's recommended budget. Madam Director of Finance, good evening. Again, you have the floor.
Okay. This is the fun part. So the Finance Committee met 4 times, September 24th, 26th, October 7th, and October 9th, and we went through the entire mayor's recommended budget, minus the general fund and the self-insurance fund. Those we are still working through, and those will be presented to the Finance Committee on October 22nd. So the Finance Committee is recommending a few changes to the mayor's recommended budget, and I wanted to note that the spreadsheet on the back of your council action sheet, I found it easier to provide this document. And what this does is it outlines each account and why the Finance Committee is making that change for the members who are not on the Finance Committee. So we can just briefly go through each change that was recommended. Number 1, the debt service fund, that's on page 276 of your budget. There was a reduction in the debt levy, and that was due to the offsetting impact fee amount for the total debt principal and interest payments. So we were able to reduce the debt levy by $100,000. So that was change number 1 recommended by the Finance Committee. Change number 2, there's a few moving pieces. This is in the capital outlay fund. After further review, it was determined that a large portion, roughly $270,000, could be reduced from the fleet program in the police department due to the excess funds that were not used in 2024 that we will be rolling over into 2025. That being said, there was excess money that could be used to fund additional projects in 2025, and those projects are listed below that the committee is recommending. The committee is recommending the ClearGov software, which is the budgeting software, and also the software that will help with the annual comprehensive financial report. That is a one-time fee, and then also the initial subscription, and then it's a small subscription fee annually after that. They're recommending the Station 1 building improvement changes, or building improvements, and that's to help with the remediation prior to Johnson Controls doing the work that they need to do in Station 1. On the second page, it's allowing the police department to replace tasers. I believe there was over 30 tasers that they were going to be replacing over a 5-year period, and this commitment is a 5-year payment commitment with no interest penalties. So you'll see this commitment through 2030. Also allows for the police department to get body cameras. I believe Chief Learman said we were the only municipality in Milwaukee County that doesn't have body cameras. So this does allow them to purchase the body cameras. And again, this is also a 5-year commitment with no interest or penalties. And then it allows a small contingency within that capital outlay fund. Number 3, capital improvement fund, some changes to this that were made from the Finance Committee. Unfortunately, the DOT project on Highway 100 from 60th to St. Martin's, we received some more accurate estimates from the DOT back in September after the mayor's recommended budget was submitted. And that being said, the cost did increase for construction. So that change is presented here. However, there was a large offset of park impact fees for this project and also the other project that's in the mayor's recommended budget, which is the Putes Pathway project. That is also 62% park impact fee eligible. So with that offset, we were able to reduce the amount of money that we would be borrowing. And actually, I believe the Finance Committee is going to recommend using general fund balance to help offset some of that capital improvement so we don't have to borrow money in 2025. And then number 4 would be the street improvement fund. Again, September 25th, after the mayor's recommended budget was presented, I got the further estimated amount for the transportation aid from the DOT. That increased $16,000 from my original estimate. So we just added that in there and then added $16,000 to the expense line for the local street improvement program. And then number 5, the impact fee fund. There was a typo in the amounts of resources. I accidentally put 75,000 in water impact fees when it should have been 750,000. So that's what that change is. So those are the changes that are coming from the Finance Committee to the Common Council for approval. And again, the levy and the tax rates are set to be presented to the Finance Committee on October 22nd, which do heavily impact the general fund. And then also the self-insurance fund, now that those recommendations have been approved, that self-insurance fund will be considered at the Finance Committee meeting on the 22nd. And then I did just want to note, because I haven't mentioned to Shirley yet, I did mention to the Finance Committee that in order to implement those changes from October 22nd, we'll need to have a special meeting on October 29th. Please.
I'll make the motion to amend.
Second.
So we have a first and a second further discussion. I'd like to stop in here for a second. Thank you, Madam Director of Finance, putting this sheet out. Excellent, well explained, and I'm very, very happy that we've got three electeds that are on the Finance Committee that are part of this whole process. And there's a lot of moving parts to this, nothing easy. This was a very, very challenging, still fluid budget. But having 3 people on the Finance Committee that are elected up here on this board, it's huge. So that's one of those boards and commissions that is vital to how this whole process works. We've got a first and a second. Any further discussion? Let's do.
Question.
Shirley, you've got the floor. Madam Clerk.
The public hearing that's scheduled for the 12th, is that going to be a special meeting as well then?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a special. Okay, I just want.
Yes, because it should be adopted before November 15th. And so I didn't want to wait until then.
Okay, just so we have a quorum.
Yep, so
The 29th, Danielle, is that for finance or is that for council?
for council.
Okay, so are you clear, Madam Clerk?
Yes, I just want to make sure.
I got it. All right, so let's go roll call on this, please.
Yes.
Alderman Pecorelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
Aye. 6 ayes, no noes, motion carries. Well done. G13, City of Franklin versus BPC Master Developer LLC and Michael Zimmerman, Milwaukee County Circuit Court Case Number 24-CV-7479. The council may enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985, Sub 1, Sub G, to confer with legal counsel for the common counsel who is rendering advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to the subject litigation, and to enter open session at the same place thereafter to act on such matters discussed therein as it deems appropriate.
Motion to go into closed.
Second.
First and a second, roll call on that, please.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
No.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Pecorelli.
Aye. 5 ayes, 1 no, no abstentions. Motion carries. We are slowly going into closed session.
Recording in progress.
It's 9:38 PM. We are back in open session. Is there a motion as discussed and closed?
So move.
Mr. City Attorney? Motion is discussed in closed session? To proceed?
Proceed as discussed in closed session.
We've got a first by Mr. Barber. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderwoman Day. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Moving on to licenses. Who's doing licensing
I will
tonight?
be mayor.
Alderwoman Eichman, you've got the floor for the extensive list here.
Why, thank you. License Committee met this evening, and the first 3 operator licenses are approved. as well as the temporary Class B beer and temporary Class B wine applicant for the St. Martin Tours Church. And we met at 5:46. We adjourned at 5:51. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent. So motion, is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Craig. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to I as in Ida. 4 points. City vouchers with an ending date of October 10, 2024, the amount of $2,009,210.41. Payroll date October 4, 2024, the amount of $515,215.72, and payments of the various payroll deductions in the amount of $285,169.20, plus city matching payments. And point 3, estimated payroll date October 18th, 2024, in the amount of $500,000, and payments of the various payroll deductions in the amount of $525,000, plus city matching payments. Point 4, estimated payroll date November 1st, 2024, in the amount of $465,000, and payments of the various payroll deductions in the amount of $260,000, plus city matching payments. Is there a motion?
Still move.
Mr. Hassan?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Barber. Roll call, please. Oh,
Thank you.
further discussion. Who's got,
Me.
Mr. Peck, we have Madam Director of Finance?
So Alderman
Could you speak into the mic?
sent me an email earlier asking a question on the check disbursement, so I just wanted to answer your question. So the city, or I should say, the question was, what are the 2 deferred comp lines on page 3? So the city offers 3 different deferred comp plans, 457B plans. Back in December, we got rid of one of the plans that only had 3 employees on it, and now we started offering the Wisconsin Deferred Comp Plan, which also handles our WRS, our retirement system. So that's what it is. So Mission Square and North Shore Bank are 2 of the deferred comp plan companies that we use.
Makes sense, thank you.
Yep.
Good. Roll call, please.
Alderman Peccarelli.
Aye.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Aye.
Alderman Hassan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Day.
Aye.
Alderman Barber.
Aye.
Alderman Craig.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nos, motion carries. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
First and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries.
Pass this down to Shirley, please.